Hi there. In this lecture we see an absolutely iconic, celebrated game of Steinitz against Curt von Bardeleben. So this is in 1895 Hastings tournament round 10. So the Hastings tournament at the time was regarded as like one of the strongest tournaments ever. It had all the elite players, basically former world champion Steinitz, who was actually a former world champion at this point in time. You had the reigning world champion Lasker. You had Shigurin, Tarash, Schletter, Blackburn, Janowski and others. Eventually it was won by Pillsbury. It was a shock tournament that Pillsbury actually won it in the end. So here we see Steinitz with the white pieces against Curt von Bardeleben, and we go into the Italian game. We have now, after bishop c5, c3. So this approach is like the modern GM approach. This move, or d3 or h3 or castling, they're all pretty solid moves with a small edge for white. We have knight f6, d4, e takes d4, and this should be about equal this position. Black hasn't done anything that wrong, so c takes d4 was played here. e5 is an alternative, and again, actually black does have a good move here to equalize, which is d5. So after bishop e2, this position, it should be about even. So anyway, we see c takes d4, bishop b4 check. And now knight c3 is interesting. It is actually a slight inaccuracy. Bishop d2 leads to simplification though. So knight takes e4, we take on b4, and we have to play, basically we have to play bishop takes f7 check. Yeah, 10 points, found that, for check. This position, queen e7, with threats like knight g3 if we move our queen away. So we end up exchanging queens. It's a boring line. It's even. It's a boring line. Bishop d2 as example. So knight c3 does add a lot of spice to the game. And we have d5. White actually has a clear advantage after d5. So this actually counts as a good surprise weapon, knight c3 here, if players are going to play d5. Knight takes e4 should have been played. And on castling, bishop takes c3. Now again, if we just play b takes c3, d5 is a small edge for black. Black's got no problems here, basically. No problems. So we should fling in d5 to make this variation interesting. And here, it still ends up in equality. We can play like this with d6 here now. And although we're a pawn down, we've got compensation. Black plays like this, ideally. This is ideal for both sides, and it's an even position. Okay, so yeah, overall it's an even position. We've got pressure on d6. We've got this e-file like pressure as well, potentially. So anyway, so knight takes e4. Yeah, this is black's ideal, play for both sides. Knight takes e4 should be fine. So d5 is actually a mistake. So e takes, knight takes d5. So on the surface, this looks as though, well, black's blockading the d pawn. Isn't this kind of good positional play from black? White just castles here. Yeah, white just castles here. And this is so dangerous for black now. We have bishop e6, which actually makes things slightly worse for black. So things are actually in a bad way here. If we take bishop takes c3, which does seem like one of the very best moves here, especially if followed up correctly. So black should now not be greedy. Black should castle. This position, black has to really find b5. This is funny territory. I know, knight takes c3, forks queen and bishop. Knight takes b5. We fling in knight g5 with a mate threat. And we should have an advantage here still. We still emerge with an advantage. Knight f6 check. Queen takes b5. This is just one variation. We end up with an advantage here. The opposite colour bishops kind of favour the attacking player here. And yeah, black has some weaknesses. Overall, we do have an advantage in this position. Okay, so that's with bishop takes c3, and things could have been actually worse for black if they played knight takes c3 here. Queen d3, we're looking at h7 here sometimes, but in this case, bishop a3, And now knight g5, now that the queen's been, disconnected from g5, we can fling in this mate threat. And let's say bishop f5, queen f3, and you can see the horrible pressure on the black position. If bishop g6, we can just play bishop takes d5 and win the exchange. So yeah, it is actually, very interesting territory on bishop takes c3. And on knight takes c3 here, b takes, black could really ask for trouble with bishop takes c3. The safest here is actually bishop e7. And this position, we are actually better. We can play rook b5 with actually a threat to switch over to this side of the board. That soft spot is softer than usual because there's no defensive knight on f6. So take this as an example, bishop d3. And let's say they allowed rook h5. We can actually play knight e5. We wouldn't worry about g takes. This is just a crushing attack position. So here, for example, we can even build up more of the attack. And they have to play defensively. If ever they took on h5, for example, here, this is an example, queen takes h7, knight d7 check. Horrible things happen to black. So yeah, knight takes c3, though, with not bishop takes c3, but bishop e7. It's still, quite a dangerous position for black. It just shows the dangers of the black position here. So knight takes c3, b takes is asking for trouble. And if bishop takes c3, so this is asking for very, very big trouble. If you ever get this position, this is asking for very, very big trouble, and there's a lot of fun to actually analyse. What do you think white should play here? Yeah, queen b3. We want to exploit the king in the centre. So bishop takes a1, bishop takes f7 check, bishop a3 check. And here, it's a really crushing position. Bishop g8 has with it the mate threat, so it's limiting black's replies. And the thing is, if queen e8, let's take queen e8 as one example, rook e1, and then we're just smashing through on e7, so that's going to be great, and we can actually just checkmate here. We'll just leave that queen pinned for queen f7 checkmate. So you might wonder, well, hold on, Kingscrusher. You might wonder, just rook takes g8. So here's like magic. This position's magic because there's a real magical multi-purpose move here for 100 points. What would you play? Yeah, knight e5. It not only threatens mate, it's a lovely vacation of a square which gives us new opportunities. When we see square vacation, we've got queen f3 as part of our toolkit now. So queen e8, queen f3 check, and remember that the knight's pinned. It's not really protecting f5. We crash through with a checkmate. So these are absolutely wonderful variations which demonstrate, this is great from a theoretical perspective, it demonstrates here that actually, you know what, knight takes d5 was actually a serious mistake. This whole variation is actually a serious mistake. And it's just compounded with bishop e6. But let's go on into the game. So already though, Steinitz plays an inaccurate move here. There's actually something, it does seem quite wrong, black's position here after bishop e6. Although at the same time, it has to be said, it visually looks very logical, right? And why is the king so unsafe? It looks very logical to have a d5 blockade. Bishop g5 seems a natural move, but it turns out rook e1 actually does seem quite crushing here, whatever black does. Yeah, it's actually it seems quite a big improvement over bishop g5. If castling, knight g5 is venomous, it's looking at e6 as a target, and it's looking at h7. If bishop takes c3, queen d3 threatening mate, and then knight takes e6, b takes c3, we've got the bishop pair, we've got pressure on e6, and here, for example, we're sitting on a nice big advantage. Yeah, it's a really fun position to play. If we go back here, and consider, actually, instead of bishop takes c3, knight takes c3, then queen d3, or queen c2 is strong, looking at h7, but queen d3 might actually be stronger. Then taking on e6, then taking on c3, and then rook takes e6. So we're a pawn up here with very dangerous threats. This is crushing as well. So yeah, rook e1 does seem as though this position, knight g5, is super dangerous. It's fun. The knight has left h7. This is a softer spot than usual. This is why this continuation, just with rook e1, it seems to combine targets of the e6 and here h7. They've been mixed together for a very dangerous position. Yeah, whatever black does. So rook e1 does seem more precise if you ever get this position. But in this game we see bishop g5 at move 10. Now bishop e7 is a mistake here. So knight takes c3, b takes. This situation with bishop e7, if we look at this, we should be here with an advantage in that case. The most accurate move is actually, instead of knight takes c3 here, the most accurate move seems to be queen d7. This seems to be the most accurate move. So say knight takes, bishop takes. We could try queen b3. Bishop takes f3 though, queen takes, and black castles. And this resulting position is only a small edge for white. Let's look at that again. So queen d7, knight takes, bishop takes. If we try knight e5 here, knight takes, bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, d takes, queen takes. It simplifies, and again white only has a small advantage. So yeah, queen d7 seems to be the most annoyingly accurate against bishop g5. So this is really what ideally should have been played for black here against this bishop g5 move. So here, yeah, let's just look at this again. Instead of bishop takes f3, which you might have thought is quite committal, bishop takes c4, white's actually getting a significant advantage because of the simple d5 threat. So the bishop's loose, so we're just winning a piece there. So that was actually impossible there, just in case you're wondering. And also, you might have been wondering here, instead of castling knight takes d4, there's queen takes b7, hitting a8 and b4. This bishop's often a liability, the downside of the black position. We're just winning material. And if queen takes d4, we have queen takes f7 checkmate. That's the worst of the lot. So yeah, the critical line seems to be queen d7. This seems to be the critical line. Queen b3, bishop takes f3. And it should be nearly even, but white has a small edge. So queen d7, the best of the lot. f6, let's go back. f6, we have just rook e1. And here, rook takes e6. This position, we're going to get a very significant advantage here. So queen b1 is pretty dangerous, looking at b7. And yeah, if king h8, queen takes b7. Okay, so f6, rook e1. If king f7, we can just blast through with rook takes e6, knight takes d5. This position, knight takes b4, is crushing. If queen d7, bishop takes d5 is crushing, bishop takes e6. So, okay, bishop e7, though, was a mistake. Not as good as queen d7. We have now a very good move. Bishop takes d5. Very, very good move. In a circumstance, bishop takes is virtually forced, because if bishop takes g5, we take on e6 and then play d5. And this is very uncomfortable for black. After e takes, knight takes d5. Although black gets the castle, we can play now something which actually gets a very clear advantage for white. Can you see why this is for 100 points? The little combination here. It's actually a very clear advantage, even though right now it's equal on pawns. We take on g5 and we actually win c7. And it's not just about winning one pawn, because now we get to play queen b3 check, and now we get to do a family fork with knight e6. So we're winning a whole exchange as well as being a pawn up. So yeah, bishop takes d5 was virtually forced. So knight takes d5, queen takes d5. We have bishop takes e7, knight takes e7, rook e1. And now this is basically in the circumstance, the very best move in the circumstance, f6. That's a very good move from Curt. If c6 had been played, we can play rook e3, and here queen c2. We're ready to build pressure on the e file, and we've got a very nice advantage here, basically. Also, you know, we could go with queen e2 as well. The king's tied in the center, and d5 is kind of useful here. Check. Queen b4. We've tied the king in the center. If they castle, we're taking on e7. So this is kind of very annoying for black, this position. So f6 is actually, in the circumstance, really good. Also, let's check out queen d7. There's knight e5, queen e8, and here queen a4 check, and queen b4 is annoying for black. Even if black castles here, queen takes b7, we do have a nice advantage there. If black doesn't castle and plays rook b8, then actually we have a neat tactical idea. Can you see what it is for 10 points? Yeah, knight takes c6, b takes, and now what's the point? Check all checks? Yeah, rook takes e7 check, queen takes b8 check, check, and now here, check all checks, 10 points. Rook e7 check. We deflect the king away from the queen. So that's crushing. So anyway, f6, yeah, in a nutshell, f6, great. Now, here, Steinitz plays a move which is pretty decent but not optimal. Queen e2. There's actually a better way. Can you see a better way than queen e2? Actually, queen a4 check is even more accurate, because on queen d7, so this or king d8 are basically virtually forced. If c6, this loses horribly. We just play queen b4 here, and in this position, what tactic do you think we have? We actually just play rook takes e7 check, and now rook e1, just pinning the queen. So that just loses horribly. b5, there's queen b4. The king has to hold on to the knight. And actually, again, we're back to this tactic. Black's losing horribly there. King d8. Yeah, this is one of the better moves. We do have a clear advantage here, though. So, yeah, let's take the case of queen d7, though. Queen b4, king f7. At minimum here, we can play queen takes b7. And now this position, black's under pressure. So rook h8, queen b3, g6, queen c2. And here, for example, h3, white has a significant advantage. So, okay, so basically, in a nutshell, it does seem as though overall queen a4 check is objectively the strongest move. But this leads to an absolutely brilliant game, though, queen e2. Make no mistake. So we have rook a to c1. So rook a d1 is also a good idea here for d5. This is an interesting position to play from. Just sack the d pawn, and we get interesting pressure on the black position. You know, this is kind of an interesting position, but it could just, you know, black could be quite stubborn, and it's nearly equal. So, okay, let's go with the game. So, rook ac1. Now, black makes a terrible mistake here, c6. This is too slow with the king in the center. It's too slow. So, black needed to play king f7. It was very much needed. This would have been a beautiful follow-up of the f6 move here, to play king f7. So, if queen c2, knight d5, and it's an even position. Black's got that dream blockade of the d pawn. Yeah, the isolated queen's pawn is proven to be, is shown to be a bit weak now at this moment. That would be equal. And if instead we try knight d2, rook h to e8, yeah, there shouldn't have been too much fuss here for black's king safety. This position, no big deal actually here, taking on b7. So it should be about even. But anyway, c6, we go into beautiful territory. There's an absolutely brilliant move played here. Can you see what it is for 100 points? d5. It's vacating d4. It's turning knight to queen pawn. It's saying, give me that parking space. Isolated queen's pawn. Give me that parking space. C takes d5. If king f7 here, we're going to play d takes, b takes, and after check here we can play knight d4. So here we're undermining black with knight takes c6, undermining the safety of the knight. And if we take this position, rook c1, rook c7, b4, we're clearly better here. So okay, so c takes d5. So yeah, the parking space is used by the knight, knight d4. We have king f7, and then knight entrenches itself on e6. We have rook h to c8. If rook a to c8, this isn't as good. Yeah, rook h c8 was actually a better idea, because here queen g4, and we have this classic tactic threat of knight g5 check to try and win the queen. I know there's king e8, but the queen's also looking at c8, so that's the wrong end, because now we also have rook takes c8. Let me just show you that. So g6, knight g5 check, king e8. We have here rook takes c8 check, because the knight's pinned. So actually we end up absolutely crushing it. We just take on c8 here, and that is actually checkmate. So here queen g4, if knight f5, we just take on f5, rook takes, queen takes isn't sufficient for black, because we throw in this check now and we're winning the queen. End of game. So yeah, rook a8 is a disaster move. So rook h8 is a good move in the circumstance. Queen g4, we have now g6. If rook takes c1 here, we can actually take on g7, and then queen f8 is checkmate. So g6, good safety point. But now knight g5 check, king e8. So here is where things get really beautiful. Guess what white plays in this position for 100 points? Yeah, we want to play rook takes e7 check. So one point is, if queen takes e7, we play check, rook takes c8, and then check, and then we're a knight up. Now, yeah, so that was on queen takes e7. If king takes e7, we play rook e1 check here, and the king has to cling on to the queen. So let's say king d8. In this situation, knight e6 check, king e7, knight c5 check, and we're winning the queen. Look at this attack on the queen. We're winning the queen. And this will be a winning position. So yes, king takes, rook e1, king d8, knight e6 is winning. If king d6, here, can you see what white plays? Yeah, there's actually queen b4 check. This requires some calculation. So rook c5, rook e6 check, and let's say queen takes, knight takes, we're with a big advantage. But otherwise, we're getting an absolutely devastating attack. Queen takes c5 check, and the attack rages on. And we're a knight up as well. So yeah, this is not possible. This is just not possible. So yeah, king d6, queen b4 check. If king c7 here, knight e6 check. If king b8, we go to queen f4 check, rook c7, knight takes c7, queen takes, and we have rook e8, checkmate. So yes, it does seem as though the king should go to f8. But now, beautiful stuff. What does white play? Yeah, rook f7 check is a really nice move. So the queen can't really take because it's rook takes c8 check. Now, if we had taken the queen, good safety point, we actually get back row mated. So this is all with a weak back row we're doing this. So we have that constraint. So rook f6, rook f7 check is a good move. If we had taken on c8, again, we can't take the queen either way because of rook c1. We can play rook f7 check here, rook g7 check, because any time the queen takes, we have that with check, that rook. And here we do have rook takes h7 check and h3. This position is actually ending up in a rook and pawn ending, which is not ideal compared to what we get in the actual game. So rook f7, I mean, it's playable, yeah, and we might grind it, but actually rook f7 check is stronger. We have king g8. So yeah, just to recap, queen takes f7, we're taking on c8. And if king e8, we have queen takes d7 checkmate. So the king goes to g8, and now rook g7 check, king h8, and the game ended with rook takes h7 check. Yeah, anytime the king takes, we're taking on d7 with check, not giving black any time. So king h8, rook takes h7 check. The game ended here. So the story goes that Curt just let the time run out, according to Winter, a famous historian, Edward Winter. So in chessgames.com, they say black resigned at this point, and Steinitz demonstrated immediately afterwards there's a mate in 10, which can only be averted by ruinous loss of material. So actually Steinitz demonstrated a mate in 10. What an amazing... So let's see this mate in 10. So king g8, rook g7 check. We have got this new upside we didn't have before, that the h file has been cleared out, which means we've got resources like this with check. So the king, if it goes to h8, we have check. Okay, so the king does go to h8 in this line. If king f8, what we do here is actually play knight h7 check, and this forces, we get a check basically, which we mop up everything with. So the king actually does have to go to h8. So we do get to use this newfound resource, queen h4, which is now check, because there's no black pawn in the h file. Now we play check, check, here check. So with the exchange down, but it's absolutely winning. If king d6 had been played, queen takes f6 check, and this is a quick mate. So king e8, queen g8 check, king e7, queen f7 check, and here after king d8, queen f8 check, and we now play a clever little trick, knight f7 check, giving us a common square d6, a supported square d6. So it's a multi-purpose move. It's not just the check. It's giving that common square d6, which we use for queen d6 checkmate. So yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful mate in 10 where the game ended. Yeah. And if king d6, actually that's simpler to look at. Queen takes f6, and the queen would have to go in front. Yeah, that's very actually simpler. So we get to use the knight here with knight f7, giving us that d6. So yeah, it's a beautiful mate in 10 at the end. Now, okay, so why have I done this forensic analysis for you? Well, it's actually an interesting line. This actually represents an interesting line as a surprise weapon with this knight c3 move, because we know for sure that bishop d2 just leads to simplification. This is just, we don't want the queens up boring. If we want a draw, maybe. But knight c3, yeah, if d5 is something likely for the opponents to play, we know now that actually we've got a glorious position here, especially if we played rook e1. The lines are absolutely beautiful. You might want to, check them out from time to time based on the analysis earlier. So yeah, it's important, from a theoretical perspective, how dangerous this is as a surprise weapon to play knight c3 here. Okay, thanks very much. Hi there. I hope you enjoyed that game sample. It's actually from my course, which you can find at the Kingscrusher TV page, which has great discounts. It's the Italian Game Mastery, the Ideal Beginner's Opening. So just very briefly, if we click there, you can also see other free sample videos. Just do expand all sections, and you can see these preview links if you want to see other free previews and get an idea of the course yourself. I'm going to keep it short here. Just basically to say I had a fantastic time seeing many brilliant games in the Italian game. You can see from the number of collections how epic some of these games are, that they've been collected like hundreds of times at chessgames.com. And yeah, I really hope you check out this index and may consider getting the course. Okay. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.